All right, you know, everyone thinks it's a rigged system and all that. The idea of being to woo delegates, even those you thought were committed to you, but you just want to keep happy, that goes back for many a campaign. In fact, it goes back more than a century. Who knows that better than one of my favorite presidential historians, Doug Wead. Doug, let's talk a little bit about that and what has been done in the past when it came to those who tried to woo delegates. I can think of Gerald Ford in 1976. He was the sitting president, but facing a real challenge by Ronald Reagan. He had a certain perk called Air Force One, didn't he?
He sure did. You know, I had Gerald Ford, my wife and I, in our own home on 2 different occasions, and one of them was when a story had just broken about these delegates and he was getting criticism. And so I asked him about it right to his face, and he said, listen, I wrote a memo and it was issued to all of my staff that there will be no quid pro quo for delegates at that convention. That's a 76 convention. I said, well, the story is you had people in the Oval Office. He said, well, that's different. Of course, we had people in the Oval Office and we had them on Air Force One, but we didn't give them any money.
All right, well, there is that, but that could be a big allure itself. I mean, the Air Force One is a pretty unique ride and moment. Jimmy Carter used it as well for his backers and delegates who might have been thinking about, I'm sure, Ted Kennedy when he was running for re-election. Let me ask you a little bit about how Kennedy played off relations. John Kennedy played off relations with the Hollywood community because Ronald Reagan did something similar. But first, to John Kennedy.
Yes, well, Peter Lawford was a big star. I mean, he starred in The Thin Man. It was the most popular television program in America. So people today, our kids don't know who Peter Lawford is, but back then nobody knew who Bobby Kennedy was. So he was a big star. And the Kennedy Suite in Los Angeles at the Biltmore Hotel ran 24/7. Beautiful young ladies, all the food you wanted, all the booze you wanted, and there was a Kennedy awake as a host or hostess 24/7 during that period. Lots of movie stars.
And then it was Bobby Kennedy trying to secure the deal at each one of those delegations. But let's fast forward to Ronald Reagan. He, of course, a creature of Hollywood. He knew, even though Republicans had a tougher time having actors and actresses in their corner, he had a lot, didn't he?
Very much so. And, you know, you mentioned Bobby Kennedy and Reagan. They had, for John Kennedy, they had index cards with the name of every delegate and a bio. Then they had thick files on every delegate. So they'll do that at this convention. They'll know the names of the dogs and the kids and what schools they go to. Reagan actually, after 1988, when George H.W. Bush won the nomination, Reagan brought all of those delegates back to the White House, to the OEOB, and he spoke to them to help unify the party. So you're not just wooing the delegates to get the nomination, you're wooing the delegates to unite the party to win the election.
All right, now, how much closes the deal? I know there are all these committed delegates, but there are many who go to Cleveland, as will be the case with the Democrats when they go to Philadelphia, who are not committed to a candidate. Quite a few in the Republican camp for that, but how do the candidates legally woo them outside of frequent trips to, which would easily buy my vote, Cinnabon?
You know, there's nothing illegal about it unless they're a governor or a congressman and they have ethics laws separate from that. If they're just an ordinary
delegate. That's interesting. If you're just an ordinary guy running for president of the United States, you don't have to soil yourself with that.
John Davis talks about Joseph Kennedy having, quote, unlimited amounts of funds to work on these delegates. And there's a story of Rockefeller taking some delegates on his plane. They're flying over South Dakota. He calls back to Washington and is able to somehow get the Park Service to turn on the lights at Mount Rushmore so he can circle again and let those delegates see Mount Rushmore lit from the sky.
All right, well, Ted Cruz doesn't have that money. Donald Trump does.
He does, and I expect Donald Trump to go into a room full of delegates and say, we're going to have a Christmas party at Trump Towers that will put the Christmas party at the White House to shame. I take care of my delegates.
Way to go. Doug, thank you. You are a font of information, young man. All right, in the meantime, we're going to talk to a priest. Not about Donald Trump and outbursts and candidates and their outbursts with each other, but about a number of schools and libraries who have a problem with the Bible.